Thanks so much for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm meteorologist Chris Bianchi here in the 9 News Weather Center. Now, big question I get all the time, and I mean all the time on social media, is whether or not we're going to have a La Nina again, and if so, how that would impact our upcoming winter. And I know it's the middle of July, and we're sitting here talking about the upcoming winter, but here in Colorado, obviously, we are very dependent on every snowflake, every inch of snow to provide water and to really just kind of conserve our way of life. So I know snow is critical, not just for skiing, but of course for water resources, for so many other reasons. And for that reason, I do want to get into a bit more detail about the fact that we're very likely going to be looking at a La Nina yet again. Give you a little bit of an idea and a bit of an overview here. The main meteorological enterprises around the world, the main governmental meteorological enterprises around the world are putting it at about a 60 to 65% chance that we will be looking at our third straight La Nina this upcoming winter. And getting 3 straight La Ninas is almost unheard of, only happened twice since 1950. So we're very likely going to be looking at our third straight La Nina. Now, with that in mind, let's start off with what the heck is a La Nina to begin with. So that's the key, I think, thing and how it drives the weather. So the La Nina and how it impacts our Colorado weather. Well, in order to figure out what a La Nina is, you got to go all the way to the eastern Pacific Ocean. Now, what happens in a La Nina is that you have cooler than average ocean temperatures in the eastern Pacific. That's it. It's as simple as that. It just means that we've got cooler than average sea surface temperatures in the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean. But what that lends to or leads to is this huge domino effect of weather that affects the whole world, because the Pacific Ocean is by far the biggest body of water in the world, and that has impacts first leading to weaker east to west trade winds, which means more thunderstorms, more moisture for Indonesia, for Malaysia, for the Philippines, for Southeastern Asia, and even Northern Australia. And that in turn leads to this, again, big domino effect, snowball effect of weather that ultimately tends to lead to drier than average conditions for the southern and western United States. Now, Colorado probably leans a little bit more south, but we're kind of right on the border of where those La Nina and El Nino impacts tend to intersect. So in an average typical La Nina winter, and by the way, this is what we saw a lot of this past winter, what tends to happen is that you generally will get an active winter in the northwestern and midwestern United States. So Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee tend to see a lot more moisture because the jet stream lifts a little further north, and that leads to more rain for not only the Midwest, but also the Pacific Northwest. Meantime, the jet stream just doesn't move as far south as it usually does, which means here in Colorado and throughout much of the southern U.S., we tend to get left alone by those impacts. But, and this is again really worth emphasizing here, in Colorado, again, geographically, you look at the United States, we're right we lean a little further south, but we're kind of in the middle. So we are on the fringe effects of a lot of these impacts. So if the jet stream leans, say, 100 miles further south than in a typical La Nina winter, that could lead to a bit of a boom of a winter for us. In fact, here in Denver, you might remember this past winter, we had basically nonstop snow between the beginning of January and the end of March. And that's because the jet stream just kind of set up overhead, and that meant that we kept getting storm after storm after storm along the Front Range. But you head south of I-70 and southern Colorado, the San Juans, the San Luis Cristos, mostly got skunked by a lot of these storms. But here in Denver and along the Front Range and throughout much of northern Colorado had a pretty good winter because of some of those repeated storms, just because of that jet stream. So again, let's go back to this for a quick second here. Again, exactly where that jet stream sets up determines whether or not we get a big winter. Now, a La Nina, going back to this map here for a quick second, tends to push the jet stream a bit further north. But notice again, even in this typical La Nina winter pattern, that jet stream is basically already clipping Colorado. So long story short is, I mentioned these sorts of typical impacts. Normally, if I tell somebody that there's an El Nino or a La Nina coming up, we arrive at these huge conclusions. But because the jet stream, even in a La Nina winter, and can lean a little further north, it's still really, really close to Colorado. So all it takes is a small divergence from that average path to give us either a big winter or to completely skunk us. So hopefully that gives you an idea about how difficult making big assumptions can be from a La Nina or an El Nino is for Colorado specifically. So, again, impacts vary by year, very widely. Again, where exactly the jet stream is determines whether or not we get a lot of snow or not. Northern Colorado tends to end up getting more snow because that jet stream tends to lean a bit further north. But southern Colorado, I think this is safe to say, the San Juans, the Sangre de Cristos, we really don't like these La Nina events. We are not that close to that average jet stream position, so we tend to get left out of a lot of storms. And the Front Range, we're right on the border of things, so it tends to be very hit or miss for us. Again, think about this past winter. This past winter was kind of a perfect example from the Front Range. We had our latest, by far, our latest first measurable snowfall on record. We had to wait until December the 10th of last year until we got measurable snow in Denver. And then it didn't stop snowing for 3 months. So it's very hit or miss for us. A La Nina winter for the Front Range for the Denver area. Again, it can be a really below average season. It can be a really above average season. Think even back to March of 2021. We had that huge snowstorm, fourth biggest snowstorm on record that took place during a La Nina winter here in Denver. So again, very, very hit or miss. It's hard to say for Denver, for areas along I-70, those impacts tend to vary a little bit. Northern Colorado, Steamboat Springs, Rocky Mountain National Park, Winter Park, those areas tend to do pretty well in a La Nina winter, while southern Colorado, I do think it's safe to say, for the San Juans, the Sangre de Cristos, we really don't like the look of things for a La Nina winter. That said, there are always exceptions to these rules. This is, again, these are not hard, fast rules necessarily. You know, again, a La Nina winter usually does lead to a lower than average winter for the southern parts of our state here, but it's not always the case. We've seen big winters in La Nina years for southern Colorado. We've also seen bad winters in northern Colorado in La Nina winters. So just, again, take this with a grain of salt, but generally speaking, looks good for northern Colorado. Denver Front Range, right along I-70, 50-50. Southern Colorado, unfortunately, doesn't look that great, the fact that we have that La Nina winter coming on up. So hopefully that answers a few of your questions, but it does look very likely that we're going to be looking at our third straight La Nina winter coming up here. Again, about 60 to 65% odds and increasing according to main governmental bodies across the world. So hopefully it gives you a pretty good overview about what to expect. Meantime, in terms of near-term weather, meteorologist Danielle Grant will have updates at 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10 on the 9 News family of networks tonight, so be sure to tune in for those. I'm meteorologist Chris Bianchi. Have a great rest of your weekend, and thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus.